Okay, can you hear me okay? Wonderful. Thanks. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you very much for the introduction there, Antoine. My name is Louise, and I have been working with startups, and I've also held my own startup twice over the last sort of 5, 6 years. And before that, I have experience as an HR professional in hospitality, tech, quite a few different environments, and most recently marketing. My main specialty that I love about HR and employment is designing systems that work and that scale. So that's really creating that employee experience and that employee brand. And I'm also excited to see that Jeff is on the call today. And I've recently been talking to Jeff about the developments in tech. So that's something we've also all got our eyes on. So I'm excited for everybody's questions today. Thank you.
Lovely. Yeah, it's wonderful to see you as well. And always ever a pleasure to kind of be here and do this stuff. It's a lot of fun. So I'm Jeff Wellstead. I'm the CEO and founder of a consultancy that focuses on building human resource capability and creating people strategy. And as of late, past a couple of years, I've really migrated very much into the space of AI in human resources management and basically helping that function see people in a much deeper, more three-dimensional fashion so that they can start to really help and manage and grow and develop amazing individuals in companies. So that's basically the work I do. I've been doing it now for 20 years, based here in the UK as an American. Um, and I've worked with, I don't know, probably like 16 or 17 different organizations in terms of building that stuff out. But yeah, now I'm all about kind of education and AI, and yeah, really thrilled to be here, with these brilliant people, to hopefully offer some brilliant advice to get you moving forward. Sure. So my do's and don'ts, given there's only a couple of us, a couple I'll throw out there. One is please make sure that as much as you probably have a really cool product and you're excited to take it to market, maybe you've invented somebody nobody's thought of. That's amazing. But I would say please link that to culture. Okay. And when I say that, everybody uses that term, and frankly, I think I'm going to stop using it because, quite frankly, people just hear it and have their own rather kind of jaded sense of what culture is all about. And basically, culture is what people do when you're not around. It's the example you set as a leadership team. It's basically the way in which you convey very positive, very critical attributes that you basically are going to market with. So this is both your commercial approach. This is basically also a promise to your vendors, to your partners, to your employees, and certainly to your customers, that this is the kind of company you are, this is what you care about, and help people identify psychologically to what it is you're doing. And then basically a more technical thing would be to build clear and very scalable processes quite early with a focus on the employee experience. That's really critical, because the better you do a job in terms of that, the faster people get bedded in, the more motivated they are day in and day out, and that always ever helps a million bucks. The don'ts, I guess, would be, here's a good one. Please, whatever you do, don't avoid difficult or what you consider to be hard conversations. It's very common in this society, because it is such a civil society more often than not. Hopefully that's been your experience anyway. Certainly it's been mine, whereby we kind of dance around the houses, right? We don't come straight out and tell people, look, this is a behavior that I'm observing about you, and quite frankly, it's toxic, or it's difficult, or it's basically working counter to what it is we want to be as a company. I need to have a conversation with you about that. I want to help you. I think you contribute amazing things, in the company, but we can't be doing this anymore, kind of thing. And we need to be good at this. We need to be skilled at this. We need not to be afraid of having these conversations. Quite frankly, people do crave, insight and talent, and direction in terms of how it is they're being perceived and how they can be more effective. So let's get good at that, right? And that's also create a norm in our organizations that we all do that with each other, with respect, with care, and with the intention, basically, of hopefully helping somebody understand something that they might only understand it as a subconscious issue. So those would be my do's and don'ts. Sorry for rambling.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. I 100% agree with everything Jeff has said. Those difficult conversations will become mountains if they're not tackled. So avoiding them doesn't actually help. It will just make the problem a lot worse. And there's certainly things we can do to help give ourselves as leaders structure to those conversations so they don't feel as difficult. I know that Jeff and I'd be happy to help people work through some of those if you have specific scenarios about them. What I would say then about some do's, do be prepared for that kind of situation. Things like having a performance management system or having something in place. It's much easier if you build that out in the beginning rather than waiting until something goes wrong and then trying to unpick something. So when you start to hire people, start to think and immediately start to put those processes in place of, right, this is what I want it to look like when it goes well, but also have a think, what am I going to do if it's not looking how I imagined? And how can you sort of negate some of that in the beginning, and how can you flesh that out to protect yourself before it goes wrong? So it's about that risk mitigation. And off the back of something Jeff said about then that onboarding with the culture and people, sometimes people feel that onboarding is just giving them the employee login, but it's so much more than that. It's about embedding your new teams into your business and helping them feel that the company mission is their mission too, and really bringing them into that. And so making your onboarding process much more effective will mean that people are likely to stay, their performance will be better. And there's a lot of studies done on not just giving them the logistical logins and here's day one and here's where you need to go and this is what you need to do, but actually, why are we doing this? How can you make them feel part of that? And I would say one thing is a don't. I would say don't mistake this old-fashioned idea of HR as just some back office admin. It's very much now moving into a space where HR and people strategy is at the front of your company. So make sure that you make space for it and you think about it proactively about what kind of company you want to create and how people will feel working there. Thanks. Back to you, Anton.
It's just some amazing stuff, and I'm grateful to the very both of you. I think we've got 45 minutes to go now, which means we can take a few questions. A reminder to those of you on the live streams, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, we are unfortunately unable to monitor your questions live there. If you do have any questions for our panels, you need to be here on Microsoft Teams. It's audio only, which means you can join from anywhere via any device or platform. Today, we're helping you with your talent journey, whether you want to know how and where to find the right people. The right people being a co-founder, maybe an advisor, a fractional, or that first full-time or part-time employee, or maybe the 34th employee, whichever it is. Whether you maybe want to know about things further down the road, interviews, tests, assessments, background checks, remuneration, equity, maybe how to build your employer brand and all that jazz. There are literally no wrong questions, and there's no need to be shy because it's a learning curve for us all. And if, by the way, your questions are not on talent, then you can save them. Maybe it's best you save them for the future conversations we run. On Mondays, as you can see, today it's talent, but then on Tuesdays it's product and tech. Wednesdays it's growth, Thursdays fundraising, second Friday of each month it's UK startup law, and third Friday of each month it's UK startup finances. Now, for those of you on the live streams, again, please don't bother sending me messages or commenting there. But what you might want to do is simply go to our website, startuptoscaleup.club, Find today's session. It's easy to find. Startup Talent Q&A 159. You click join. It's a quick registration that gets you a link to your email with this call. And through that link, you can join us here. When you're here, simply drop your question in the chat. I'll then give you the mic and you can ask the panelists. And actually, whilst you're on our website, you might want to join our WhatsApp community. We've got some groups of founders and investors and operators that you can sort of try and build a network with, or maybe have a peer-to-peer discussion about things that matter to you. Now, let's go on to our first question. I'll read it out loud for the live streams, but the panelists can read it in the chat here if you like. The question: I'm the founder of a pre-seed educational gaming startup in Scarborough, focused on developing interactive history games for primary schools. As we begin working with freelance designers and voice actors, we need standardized contract templates that ensure clear ownership of work and protect our IP. Given our limited funds, what key terms should we include in contracts for creative work to cover rights and deliverables effectively? How can we streamline these templates for different freelance roles, ensuring they're adaptable yet consistent across projects? This is a very good question. I've got a couple of thoughts, but I'm going to go to the panelists first. We can perhaps go to, tell you what, I just remembered, Louise is also quite keen on the legal side of things. So we can start with Louise, and then we'll go on to Jeff. Cool. And then we'll take it from there. Louise?
Wonderful, thank you. Well, like any good lawyer, I'm going to say, well, it depends, and not give you any specific answer whatsoever. No, I think when it comes to contracts and terms, I would actually not be inclined to do something so standard that it is possible for all roles, because then it doesn't then work for what you need for each one. So yes, I would be inclined to have your template for your company with your branding, and have some of your key terms about what's important to you. But I would be trying to at least do that by department, but I wouldn't want to have one contract that works for everything, because that's not possible. And then it means you will have gaps and it will be stumbled. So they will need to be able to edit it according to the specific role that they're looking for. I would make sure to have a look at things like maybe intellectual property. I'm not sure if that's something that is relevant with their particular roles that they're looking to hire, but making sure, especially now, and I'm sure Jeff will comment on this, with the use of AI, people who are especially looking at the creation of things such as in gaming or education, where there might be content pieces, the employees may be using AI. And it's important to note, if they are creating freelancer contracts versus employee contracts, that distinction is very different, because as a company, you might want to put a clause in that anything they create for our app is our property, but the courts don't really tend to listen or pay that much attention to sort of a catch-all clause like that. So you need to decide, are you employing people, in which case they are employed on your payroll for the creation of content for things like edutech, games, content, whatever, or are you using freelance contractors, which is more flexible for you on your budget if you're struggling and you just want little bits here and there on more flexible contracts? But then you need to be very careful in your terms that you have something around the clause of intellectual property over who owns that. Because if they're going to be using AI or creating something online, you need to make sure that it's owned by someone and it's not just from the internet, for example. So I would be just takeaway for this long ramble is make sure you're looking at intellectual property and how you are able to protect yourself in that. And then the other question was asking about the limited funds for creative work to cover it. Okay. Yeah, I think I've spoken a little bit about that, how you can make it interesting. So no, I'm going to move on to Jeff. I'm going to see what Jeff has to say about this.
It's very kind of you, and a very thorough going over. You hit a lot of the points I probably would make, but just for completeness's sake, that's even an expression. Because I've worked for organizations that have employed freelance contractors, and it was actually a gaming company actually at some point. And so there was a lot of this, people dropping in, doing some artwork or doing some, kind of game design or whatever it was. And this was always a bit of a nightmare. But fortunately, we had really, really good in-house attorney. And what I learned basically from him is, look, a couple of critical things you want to do is, to Louise's point, you want really clear intellectual property or IP ownership, right? In terms of a clause around that, in terms of, this is the work we need you to create, but we're the ones potentially to own it. And you want to make sure that all rights transfer to your company upon payment, obviously, to the freelancer, right? There's sort of a little critical thing there. Always define the scope of work and be really specific. Don't just be like, oh, this person's going to come in here and whip out, I don't know, 3 or 4 different, kind of caricatures and then be gone. That's not good enough. Try to be really kind of exact around it because it just helps you in the process. Usage rights, right? If IP isn't assigned, then basically, secure basically some kind of exclusive or perpetual royalty-free license in terms of that stuff, depending on what it is. Always ever make sure from a confidentiality perspective that your company's covered. And to Louise's point about this issue of ensuring that the work is original and it won't infringe on other copyrights that will then get the company in trouble. This notion of warranties and indemnity is a really critical thing to consider. Look, in terms of the construct of this stuff, very quickly, I think, Louise basically said a one-size-fits-all contract is probably not a good idea. And I would agree, because there's a lot of kind of like, there's depth and there is different shapes and forms depending on the type of person that you're hiring. And I'll go into those in a second. But I think it's a good idea to probably create what you call a master services agreement, an MSA, as sort of a boilerplate covering all the kind of legal terms, IP, confidentiality, how payments work, and all these other kinds of bits. I think it's good to start with that, but then have that follows on, depending on the role of the person coming in, a role-specific statement of work, right, in terms of add-ons for each type of freelancer. So like a designer, the deliverables might be things like user interface assets or style guides or game sprites, things of that nature. A voice actor might have audio files, right, or usage, license duration, issues. A developer might be focusing on source code and documentation of that code and things of that nature. They're very different jobs, and so therefore should probably have different treatments under the statement of work. And you should always ever kind of outline deliverables and the timelines and the milestones and then payment triggers. Really critical, because you don't want to basically spend time arguing, with people who are not going to be employees long term, but do need to deliver powerful value now, quickly, and at some point you want them to leave happy, hopefully, and willing to kind of do work for you again. That's how you build up a great stable of good characters. Couple of tools might be useful for you to kind of think about that I've used or seen used. One is called Juro, Juro, which basically is sort of like legal templates and guidelines. Zegal is another one I've heard, Zegal. I'll drop these in the conversation in a second because I know Anton's going to ask me. And I think there's another one called, I think it's right, but I think it's called Contract Book. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's all one word. And again, full of templates and so forth. I think Seed Legals is another one. I don't know how affordable they are, but they're certainly very thorough. Seed Legals is another one. But anyway, I'll shut up. Sorry, back to you, Anton.
Thank you very much. One of my businesses, a recruitment business, one of a few recruitment businesses I've had, ended up failing because it got to a point where I didn't have money to pay lawyers to do my contract templates. And I wasn't really quite sure about where to go to get the other contracts. And every time I spoke to kind of legal specialists, because they wanted me to go to them, and oh, no, the ones on the internet, they're rubbish, don't go there. And the times that I spoke to fellow recruitment agencies, I ended up speaking to Scum because they wouldn't share it with me. And I struggled because I got extremely lucky and blessed to get quite a few contracts simultaneously with a few companies. And I think it was my first recruitment business. I really struggled because I didn't want them to know that I didn't have the contract. I didn't want to lie to them. And I didn't want to steal contracts from the previous company I was working with because I was scared that they had connections in these companies. And long story short, in the end, I kind of told them the truth. I don't actually have contracts, but I assumed that companies like yours, you'd have your own contracts. Hence, I can try and find them. And that didn't really go down well with them. So I can fully understand how it is. But one thing I can tell you is that unfortunately, if you can't afford to get your own contracts and get a lawyer, then you might have some challenges. But with, I think, 30 something quid, you can go to something like Simply Business, if I remember it correctly, and you can get a ton of contracts. Yes, they are not, you shouldn't use them one size fits all. You should be as clear as you possibly can, but don't just leave it for the sake of it. Do not go and pay thousands and thousands of pounds to lawyers that will literally, and I've been down that route, they gave me these templates that they said, oh, they spent hours on them. And then when I actually went through details, you could clearly tell that they just copied from another one, and more often than not, they weren't even the right contracts. So the point I'm trying to make is you've got things like Federation of Small Businesses, if I'm not mistaken, and a few other organizations that, if you're a member, they have quite a bit of legal templates that you can use. So do not, sorry, I'll take that back. I'm not telling you what to do, but personally, I've now reached a level where for these kind of things, I wouldn't go and pay thousands of pounds to lawyers to give you templates. So look at things like Simply Business and a few others out there. Spend a bit of money. Yes, you have to do some homework yourself, but reach out to people on LinkedIn. And like Louise here says, send me or Jeff a message and we'll help you all out with some free or affordable resources. But literally, there is plenty of stuff out there. So give that a try. Okay, we have spent way too long on this question, but it's fine. So now let's try and spend some time on a few more questions. Jamal has asked a question. Let me give you the mic, Jamal. Where are you? Found Jamal. Allow mic. Let's see. Okay. Can you hear us, Jamal? Are you audible?
Yeah. Hi,
Good
everyone.
man.
Do you hear me? Perfect.
Yes, we can. Please introduce yourself and then fire away with your question, buddy.
Perfect. Cool. So I'm founder of a couple of startups from UK and France, and now working in MENA region. So mainly in health tech, we are developing different solutions for clinical trial, medical staff, mainly chronic disease as cancer, for example, diabetes, cardiology. So yeah, a couple of amazing idea, but we are now in startup phase. So we're wondering to connect as much as we can with local funding and all this, ecosystem that could help or select the best talent, optimize finance, and then boost this stage, which is
Very good.
strategic and critical. Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for that. So the question is there a possibility to leverage a pool of skills without committing to long-term employment or engagement? And then we'll go back to the IP in a second. But in terms of that pool, I would say there's a few ways to go about it. Number one, I've used things like Fiverr and found people there to do it's tedious. Don't get me wrong. You have to get in touch with hundreds of people, but you can find people to do some great work there. You just have to be able to put in the time. Two, you can go to agencies, and three, you can simply look up online and find people, especially on LinkedIn, people that are fractionals, people that are self-employed, people that are consultants, and just kind of create a group as you go along with these people, trying to understand what is it that you may need in the next few months, and that is definitely possible. Or if you've got the money, simply go to agencies, and that makes it even easier. But let's see what Louise and Jeff got to say. Let's start with Jeff. Jeff, what are your thoughts on Jamal's point here?
Yeah, thanks, Anton. Just building off of what you were just talking about. Look, I mean, early days, I think this is arguably the only way that basically you can kind of tap into talent, aside from probably having a co-founder or a couple of co-founders. But I would definitely kind of tap into the fractional expert model in terms of anything outside of your core IP. So doing things like related to product or legal or I don't know, whatever it is, growth oriented sales stuff, things of that nature. I think you could definitely hire some fractional people. And again, just agree very specific terms and anticipated outcomes and payment terms and things of that nature up front, and work that out together. I think that's critical. A couple of platforms might be, you mentioned Fiverr. I think a couple other ones are like TopTal, TOPTAL. I've heard of one's called Flexa. And then there, I think if it's still around, AngelList Talent is another one for more kind of fractional exec communities. The other thing is that, you know, as you're bringing freelancers and or people to kind of come in basically to kind of deliver work that only kind of talented people can do, make sure you are always ever kind of paying attention and building a talent bench, you know what I mean, in terms of who did what work for you and to what degree were you pleased by it, and always ever keep that stable of folks warm and keep them plugged into what's going on in terms of like newsletters and things of that nature. I think that's always ever good. The other thing I've seen work quite well is collaborating with like accelerators or innovation labs that are oftentimes set up by universities, you know, to kind of help their students get exposure to the outside world. I work with 2 startups now, excuse me, who have done that. One with the City College in London, the other one with Bournemouth University, and it's really been interesting. These supposed kids actually have a lot of worthy brain work going on there, and they're obviously being exposed to some of the more leading edge thinking in that space. So those would be, you know, places where I think you'll get a lot of cooperation at a relatively low expense rate.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Louise.
Okay. Yeah, Jeff covered, I think, most of the things I was going to say, quite comprehensive. Also, don't feel that you have to use people for whole extensive bits of projects. You can also break projects down into sub projects, and as Jeff said, then you can kind of understand who's building which parts. I wasn't sure exactly whether or not you said you already had any team members or anything like that. You could also have like a kind of gig board internally, and what we mean by that is even if you've got your existing teams, that doesn't mean that you can't give them the opportunity to also see what other things that you're using. So use your existing talent pool and offer them, hey guys, this is the things that we're working on. Does anybody want to have a go at any of these bits? And then you can see if any of those short-term bits can be covered by the internal team, but without having to go externally for something else. I would still keep those as like a side project and separate from some of their existing contract work, but that could be quite interesting. And also just make sure that you're very clear with everybody on the expectations of, we're hiring for this bit of this project, and that's all we're looking for at this stage, so that people don't get false expectations and they don't get hurt if you don't take them forward from that to something else. And really key, as Jeff said, make sure that you make a note and keep accurate record of what contractors did what work for what rate, and then you can keep a record of it, so later on when you go through and you need a different project or something else, that's how you start to build your bank. I think we already covered some of those different pools that you can use, such as TopTal, Upwork, Arc, there's a couple of different ones, so do have a look at that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reese.
Thank you.
Can I bring just a comment?
Of course
yeah.
you can, Jamal.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. So yeah, I've been in the London Tech Week as well, been in contact with Innovate UK, and they suggest, as Jeff said, collaborate with university labs, which could accelerate and take advantage of certain young skills, and they could be very, very innovative as well, creative. I agree completely with that, and thanks for sharing all these platforms. Our aim, our main concern is about the capability and performance, because we know when we mainly in AI technology now, because we are interacting, we are developing solution with a new technology with interoperable system, interacting with different existing healthcare systems as well that require certain level of knowledge. So thanks so much, Louise, as well for this strategic thoughts and advice. We are really thinking about that and taking on board this. Because the connection, and I mean, main concern is to find the right person, as we have these two, how to say, constraints, time and budget. But it's really helpful, and thanks so much for giving the opportunity to share. Ask question.
You're very welcome. And
Thank you.
Jamal, one last
Thank you.
thing, if I may. There are some good WhatsApp groups out there that you can join. I'm part of a few, and they tend to be quite helpful. Just obviously, you've got to clarify that you're not looking for recruitment to get, if that's the case, obviously, that you're not looking for recruitment agencies to help you. So make it very clear. And
Okay.
if you are, I'm part of some groups that have 1,000 people in it. So if you are, find some of those groups, join them, and literally just post. Because I can see a lot of stuff is happening through those groups as well. And there's people that, if they don't do it themselves, they probably know somebody who's done work for them, and so on. And obviously, there's nothing better than people you have already worked. And sort of Louise touched a bit on that. There's nothing better than people you've already worked with that you can go to, and for them to then recommend you somebody. So don't be reluctant on that. But otherwise, thank you very much for your question. Now, you also asked a question on the IP side of it. It's because today it's on talent. It might be a good idea, and I know it's not happening anytime soon, but on the second Friday of each month, we have a UK startup law Q&A, so where we have quite a few lawyers on stage, and the next one is on the 11th of July. Now, if your question can wait until then, I would be more than happy to give you a priority to ask the question if you want to join us there. And if you want, tell you what, actually, I'm gonna share that here with our in the chat. I'll share the link to that legal Q&A, and if you want to register for it so that you don't miss it, feel free to do so. And with that, we're not going to go too deep into it, because I'd rather go when it's the relevant Q&A, if that's okay.
I agree. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and please do feel free to join us again. Would love to hear on your progress, Jamal.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, guys.
You're welcome. Best of luck. Right, quick reset of the conversation. Then this is Startup Talent Q&A 159. We're doing this to help startups with whatever questions you may have in terms of finding, keeping, hiring, training, and empowering the right people for your business. Yeah, it's quite simple. If you're a startup in the conversation here, all you have to do, like Jamal just did, drop your question in the chat. We give you the mic, then you ask the question. If, however, you're on the live streams, whether that's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, please be aware that unfortunately we are unable to monitor your questions there live. So you'd have to join us here on Microsoft Teams. It's audio only, which means you can join via any device or platform. Quickest way to do that is to visit our site, startuptoscaleup.club. Find today's session, which is Startup Talent Q&A 159. You click join. It's a quick registration. That gets you a link to your email, and through that link, you can join us here. When you actually visit our website, startuptoscaleup.club, you also want to join our WhatsApp community. We've got some highly curated peer-to-peer groups of founders, investors, and operators that you can join. At the top and bottom of that website, we've got a WhatsApp icon. And if you click on that, you'll be able to join our groups. Now, we only have 19 minutes to go. Maybe we can read the next question. I'll put it in the chat for the panelists to see, but I'm going to read it out loud for the live streams. So I'm the co-founder of a pre-seed PropTech startup in Gloucester, where we develop AI tools to help property managers predict and manage maintenance needs. With limited resources for extensive recruitment processes, how can we create a streamlined but effective interview process to evaluate both technical and problem-solving skills? Also, what affordable assessment tools could we use to test candidates' ability to handle real-world scenarios relevant to property management, ensuring we identify the best fit for our team? Oh, this is a brilliant question. I can't remember. I think we started with the Jeff in the last one and then Louise. So now we'll switch it. We'll go on to Louise first and then Jeff. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Louise.
Okay, so when I first read this, the only thing I read and I see is kind of this founder is thinking overwhelmed. Oh my goodness, I have to recruit. I need this big process. I don't know what tools. And I think let's just scale it right back to impact. What is it that you actually want? You don't want at this stage a big fancy piece of software. What you want is to understand exactly how to get the candidate that you want by filtering through the applicants. So I would stop looking for a specific type of tool at this stage, whilst money is still an issue and you are able to do something based on more the impact you want. And I would be focusing on the questions. So in order to think about our interview process, make it streamlined by having it just in the two parts, not having 6, 7, 8, 9 long questions and long interview processes, and think, how can I make the questions I do ask really good? And a lot of people are tempted to ask things like, are you a team player? And then the other person goes, yes. And then you go, oh, well, now I have 10 candidates who've given me the same answer, and I'm not really sure actually how to pick who's better for the job. So I would be really specific about your questions. And I would say something like, for example, if you're talking about this team player one, you could say, tell me about a time that you had to convince someone that they had to use a new piece of software or change that process. How did you approach it and what did you do? Suddenly, you'll get some candidates who go, yes, and they will give you a specific method of a specific incident of a specific thing that they did to change a team member's mind and to get somebody on board. Otherwise, you'll get somebody who goes, oh, well, loads of times. And immediately you're able to tell who you're able to work with and who not, and like real-time data. So get really specific about your questions. And I would say also for things that are like more technical, you could ask them to do, I'm not a huge fan of getting people to do loads of free work during the interview process. I don't think it's fair. But you can say to them, okay, tell me in a few words how you'd map out, this property ticket system I assume they're using for, it says property management, right? So you could say, okay, from the minute something's reported to the moment it's going to be resolved, walk me through what that product roadmap process looks like. Somebody who knows what they're talking about will even be able to give you a couple of steps versus somebody who's maybe just blagging it will go, oh, I can get back to you later, or I'm not sure, or I didn't know, or something like that. So my main takeaway would be, don't worry about what software you're going to use, and instead think about how you can make your questions really good. And before you ask them, what does a good answer look like and what does a bad answer look like? And hopefully that will help you standardize the process. Over to you, Jeff.
Amazing. That was awesome. Well done, Louise. Behavioral interviewing question methodology is super important. That's exactly what you're talking about. Where, if this is a scenario, let me paint it for you because it's real to us. But then where basically have you encountered similar types of things and how is it you worked your way through it? And I sometimes love asking the corollary to that, which is where have you failed doing this and what did you learn from it? Kind of thing. Not that that's particularly clever, but it just it shows also people's level of resilience and the fact that they can bounce back, dust themselves off, and get on with doing something better the following time. I think that's super helpful. Louise covered off a lot of critical things, but I appreciate that you want to keep this lean. So you can do that. There's plenty of like relatively inexpensive tools to do that. But in truth, you own the content. Okay, this is your world. This is your reality. You need to basically then share with members of your existing company if we're going to replace somebody in this job, let's say, is going to be looking after air conditioning units, and in particular, or heat pump units, or whatever the case, and we need therefore somebody to be technical. We need somebody with prior experience doing this, working with multiple models, willing to travel, really good with customers, brilliant at problem solving, technical problem solving, very, very independently minded. These kinds of things. You got to write all that stuff down, right? That's all stuff you want to basically interrogate people on, and basically find out, how would you behave in this particular scenario. You always from a streamlined interview process, I think pre-screening is important. And in that pre-screening, what you're really looking for is cultural fit, is the motivation, what drives them internally. And basically, like, asking them simple questions like, what excites you about solving prop tech solutions, as an example, right? And what you're listening for is curiosity, clarity, in terms of, kind of being clear about what it is they're talking about, and kind of aligning with kind of like, how do I deliver a professional service and present a very professional look and feel to the customers, while then realizing that our company is actually still very much in early stage chaos. You want somebody who's going to bring maturity and improvement to that process. In terms of then kind of like doing technical and practical challenges, you can use tools like like Typeform and a bit of ChatGPT, for instance, to have ChatGPT kind of like come up with a set of questions that Typeform can then very quickly convert into sort of an interactive survey, and really get some really good information from people. Another one that I like a lot is called Test Gorilla, right? All one word, Test Gorilla. And it offers like sort of I don't know, it's very affordable, like pre-hire assessments, basically for roles having to do with things like data analysis or property management logic or problem solving skills, or, relationship building skills, teamwork skills, things like that. Really, really good for that. You don't need to break the bank on this, but you do need to bring as much specificity and sense of requirement in terms of the technical and behavioral, kind of requirements that you're trying to drive in your organization. And don't, even though you might have to interview sometimes like 25 people to get to the 26th person who is just perfect for it, you're much better off doing that than, frankly, just bringing people in who are close enough, because frankly you just have too much work on your desk. Those would be my quick contributions. Anton.
Thank you very much to both of you. Really appreciate that. That was brilliant. Personally, just to reiterate what both of you have said, the STAR method of interviewing, where you're looking for STAR method answers: situation, task at hand, their actions, and the end results, can be really useful when doing interviews. You can also do role plays depending on what you're doing. You can also find some what they call SJTs, situational judgment tests, that you can find for free online. And this is simply to weed out some people that you don't have to end up interviewing. They won't find you the star employee, but they are very likely to save you time, so that you end up not having to interview 412 people, but maybe end up interviewing only 6 people. And if you, depending on what role you're looking to fill and so on, you can find quite a few of those SJTs for free out there, and just send them off via email to these people. Right, we've got 9 minutes to go. I think one more question. We'll try and answer this as quick as we can, and then we'll take it from there. So, as the founder of a pre-seed biotech startup in Wakefield focused on developing microbial solutions for soil health, I'm aware of the importance of conducting background checks as we expand our lab team. With a limited budget, what affordable methods can we use to verify the qualifications and prior experience of scientific hires? Plus, how can we document these checks to provide transparency and assurance for our investors, demonstrating our commitment to building a skilled and reliable team. Well, here's what I would do. I would call up the people that they said they worked at, and two, I would get them themselves to get a criminal record check, and you can say to them, if you end up getting hired, we'll then reimburse you for that criminal record check. Let's see what the legal in our team has got to say, and then we'll go on to Jeff. Louise?
Thank you. So I would say you would need to start by carrying out right to work checks. In the UK, this is a requirement of all companies in the UK. So you need to make sure if somebody says that they have the right visa or anything like that, that you do need to check. That is your legal responsibility. And if you don't do it, there are hefty fines and they are going up. So do have a look at that. You are allowed to ask about the criminal records checks, but only if it's really justified specifically, and it would be the DBS ones, but you need to be able to justify why. You can't just do it because you feel like, oh, I want to make sure this person's trustworthy. It needs to be, because it's relevant to the lab or something like that. So make sure that you've got that justified in your records or head or data or why it's relevant. And you can contact references, as you've mentioned, contact previous employers. You would need to get the candidate's consent to do so first. You're not able, or you shouldn't really do any checks without telling the candidates. So they need to know, because of the GDPR rules, they need to know what data you're going to collect and why, and what you intend to do with that data that you collect. So just be aware and just be mindful, and just also be aware that things like sort of contacting references, I personally think it's a little bit more old-fashioned now. Most people decline to give references, and if they do, also, if you were to ring up another company, they can also just decline to talk to you, because they themselves don't really want to start telling you the truth about a candidate. So I'm not sure it's necessarily that relevant anymore, or how trustworthy that can be. So I would more go down trying to have that really thorough interview process we talked about, and then looking at actual records that we can verify, i.e. the DBS or those sorts of checks with the candidate's permission. I'm not sure what else I would say at this stage on that. Maybe just that you could include, in your actual process, as we mentioned, actually talk about like how long you'll keep that information that you get, what you intend to do with it. Make that all part of, on your job description or on your forms, actually what you intend to do with that data. Without sort of more specific information on the company, I don't know if I'd want to say anything further. Jeff, do you have something more specific there you want to add?
Yeah, I guess I'll take a slightly different angle, because I think you're absolutely right. If you need to do this super cheaply and you just literally have no money, other than paying the phone bill, trying to call people up, it's time consuming. And to your point, Louise, it can be frustrating, because oftentimes the HR teams, when you're trying to kind of verify employment and things of that nature, are held to offering no qualitative data whatsoever, aside from name, rank, and serial number. What dates of employment were, what somebody's job title was, and that's it. That's about what they'll give you. I have worked for a number of kind of like early stage startups, in particular an insurtech company, and insurance is bound by the same kind of financial regulations that a lot of other banks and so forth are bound by, which can be very onerous. So we were not messing about when we basically had to kind of like start deploying background checks, and we ended up basically I ended up basically identifying some great tools that were extraordinarily affordable, and frankly added a lot of credibility for our investors and for the regulators, when we just simply pointed to those and said, this is what we use. In particular, Zinc, just ZINC, did a phenomenal job operating in like 140 countries globally. They do all of the background checking work online, using their connectivity tools to police departments, to credit bureaus, to employers, you name it, and to obviously DBS checks and all those kinds of things too. You can literally make it as complicated and thorough as you like, or you can it's sort of like a menu, or you can just pare it back to the very basics. But basically, you can get these background checks done for like 15 quid per individual, depending on what you're lking for.
Is it really that deep?
Huh?
Is it really that cheap? Because I've spoken to a few of those companies, and it was nothing like that. You had to kind of pay some kind of joining fee, and then per person. And
Yeah.
Even a couple of months ago, it worked out kind of pretty much having to pay a few thousand to a few that I spoke. But I'd love to have a chat with you later on some
Yeah.
recommendations you may have.
Yes, Zinc is great. There's like Zinc. There's another one called Checkr, Checkr, and then the other one I've used is I think called Notion, which is not necessarily Notion, the background check. But anyway, but yeah, these guys, and these are relatively basic background checks. If you're going to be heavily regulated and you're going to be looked at and audited on a regular basis, you may in fact have to pay closer to 80 to 100 quid, per background check, depending on the information you're looking for. But because it's all online, it comes back to you very, very quickly. And you basically have set up the entire workflow with Zinc in advance, for instance. And so you kind of know what to expect, usually within a very, very short frame of time, like 2 weeks. But I mean, to Lewis's point too, you also have to make sure that you request and indicate as a condition of employment, with the organization, you have to, pass a background check and then provide whatever details you think are relevant. But anyway, and I'll put a list of these together in the what you call it.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
In the chat. Thank you very much for that. One thing that is worth remembering is if you are handling any personal data, you need to register with ICO. And 2, I would strongly advise that you take one of these courses. And I think you can go to things like CV Library and quite a few other places where they publish these courses. They don't cost an arm and a leg. You spend a few hours studying it, and then depending on what you're doing, could be anything from 90 minutes to maybe a series of tests. And you take those tests, and once you pass them, you can actually be the qualified GDPR person in your business. And therefore, you cover a lot of legal minefields by having that. I guess the main thing is that you learn how to handle people's data, but most importantly, you need to have somebody who's certified for, not always, but quite often. So I would definitely advise you do that. We are now 1 minute away from wrapping up shop. So I guess it's time for some parting words. Let's start with the lady of the house, and then we'll go on to Jeff. Louise?
Wonderful. Thanks, Anton. Parting words, I would just say make sure that you document everything, whether that is from what hiring you need to your job description, your expectations, the performance management systems we talked about, what your missions and values are. Write everything down. It is so important, especially then when you are looking then for investors or anything like that. The more stuff you have written down and planned out, it will be easier for you to visualize and see some of those gaps. And it's also easier for you to make sure that your expectations are aligning with someone else's expectations when you have something written down. So it seems basic, but it's a lifesaver, especially later on if there's any disputes in any way. Write and record and document, not record like audios. Obviously, you need consent for that. I just mean keep your own notes and keep everything recorded down. And make sure that you give some space to think about what your people strategy is. HR now in companies that are successful and moving forward are prioritizing it and putting it at the front of their company. So think, what is your people strategy and how are you going to achieve it? Thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking on the panel here today. Handing over to Jeff.
Yeah, it was awesome hearing you again. And thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Words of advice. Look, I mean, if there's anything I think that we would take away from these types of sessions, it's the fact that, look, HR is not just about some boring bureaucratic hiring and firing and handbook management, function in your business. It's really kind of how you build, the humanity, in your organization. How do you build the trust? How do you scale culture? Right? How do you protect the core of what makes you guys valuable and powerful in your realms? Your people and your ideas. That stuff is super important, right? So you don't need to be a big team. You don't need to have a big budget, but you definitely need big clarity. You need to kind of communicate with people regularly and often, Even share your own vulnerabilities and your own insecurities about things. Let everybody know that they are in this for the long haul. And so therefore everybody has to contribute to not just the success of the organization, but sometimes the survivability of it. And it's important that everybody kind of pulls their weight. So anyway, so I just be intentional about how it is you bring people into your mission. Be really thorough and very caring and very exacting in terms of the types of people or who are going to kind of help you build from here on out. Early stage hiring, I think, is essential. It's essential that basically you bring people who are going to help scale your culture, scale your dream, and basically bring it to the world in a way that's very aligned, as opposed to very contentious and broken and fragmented, which can often happen as well. But anyway, those are my my thoughts of the day.
Well, thank you very much to both of you. I really appreciate that. Also, really appreciate everyone that tuned in, especially those of you that joined us live here on Microsoft Teams, and especially Jamal that dropped a question live onto our panels. As you probably noticed, it makes for a much better conversation, and it also helps the panelists to give more detailed and kind of relevant answers. Quick reminder, if you are sending us questions, first of all, we're not really keen on those, so please join us live. But even when you do, as you've probably noticed, the last quite a few sessions, a lot of the questions seem to have a certain format, and that's why and the reason for that is because I get questions like, where is it, for example, how do you handle conflicts within team members? No background, nothing, or sometimes questions that are really there's no meat there. So now I'm trying to get a certain format. So I'm having to put these questions that you sent and asking GDPR, ChatGPT to provide some meat on those backgrounds and all those questions. So the least you can do is listen to a previous conversation that we've had and say, this is how they want the questions. So please try to bear that in mind. But quick reminder, we run 6 regular sessions: Monday's Talent, Tuesday's Product and Tech, Wednesday's Growth, Thursday's Fundraising, second Friday of each month it's UK Startup Law, and third Friday of each month is UK Startup Finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time. You can register to any of them via our site, startuptoscaleup.com. Simply go there, click join, quick registration. That gets you a link so that you can then join us audio only on the day of the session. We also have something called Startup of the Month, where each month we pick one startup that we feature on all our sessions. That's 16 to 19 sessions per month, and you get featured to our community of founders and investors and operators and so on. If you go onto our site, you'll be able to find on the menu Startup of the Month and read there how to enter this competition. When you're there, actually you might also want to join our WhatsApp community. At the top and bottom of our site, you've got a WhatsApp icon. You can join groups of founders, investors and operators. With that in mind, I bid you all a brilliant afternoon. Hopefully you'll be able to join us tomorrow for Startup Product and Tech, where we have some amazing product and tech experts, from CTOs to chief product officers and engineers and so on, where you can ask them anything about building your early stage, anything from product roadmap all the way to launching your MVP. That is at 12 o'clock as always, and please feel free to register for it. And thank you, and God bless you all. Bye-bye for now.